Today we're going to go over microphones, and I have a whole bunch of microphone stuff to show you. This weekend has been kind of crazy for me. I'm sorry if I've been a little lax with the email response, but I actually put together just a little kind of slideshow to show you what my weekend was. So we started out this weekend. I had a gig this weekend, and Toto never plays private parties. We've never done it in the entire 10 years I've been there. And so this very wealthy individual was retiring, and they invited us to play and I guess paid the guys a bunch of money. And so we got all the stuff and loaded up, and let me just kind of show you what we got here. So we started out Saturday morning loading the truck, and then we immediately went for a nice Mexican dinner at Granada before the bus left. So we had a bus ride up to Northern California, up by San Francisco, up in wine country. And so we had our really nice lunch here. That's our drum tech and our wardrobe girl. And there's my lunch. How about that, huh?
So we're up here in beautiful wine country, and we got to our gig today.
And we were in a typhoon.
There's a typhoon here. So this little stage built. It's a private party, only about 60 people.
So we get there, and there's literally a typhoon. We were in the eye, and the venue was up a mountain. And so we barely got the truck up there. The truck got stuck in between two iron gates and had to go back and forth about 10 times to get up the hill. And it was massively wet and water flooding everywhere. Then we get there, and they built this little tiny stage for us. This is like 24 feet across. We're usually 40 to 50 feet across, you know. So they put up this little stage, and it's pouring down raining. And we're thinking, we're going to be wet all day, you know. So we had to make another plan, and we found this room upstairs.
And we're going to forklift up all the equipment up to the second floor. And
So we had
it happened somehow.
Show must go on, right?
So this is where we're going to play.
No lights, none.
No stage, no lights. Throw up a sound system, put the band by the balcony. Hey, I'm on the drum. Here's Johnny on the drum riser.
That's our guitar tech, Johnny.
Smaller kit this time, I think. And then sound will go back here on the back wall. They're going to open up these doors. There you go.
No way to turn the truck around, no way to back it in. They finally finagled it. We lift all of our gear up with a forklift, piece or two at a time. Coming out of the semi. Those two consoles are worth about as much as a house. And so we set up upstairs. And this is a tin roof.
Here's my front of house rig.
It's incredibly loud. Here's my front of house, yeah.
Console. These are compressors for the lead artist and my system control for the PA. And this is a Digico SD10.
Digico console.
And all of my reverbs are coming out of this laptop. And so if I switch screens here, if I change songs here, they change on the laptop also. And this is a recording computer. This is where we were supposed to play.
And there's our rained out stage. So check this out coming up here.
Rained out. There's a UFO over here.
So this UFO, this lady that owns this place, she bought this as a piece of artwork. And the way it works is you go inside it. There's one button in there, and you press the one button, and it starts a countdown, 10, 9, 8, and then it starts shaking. And so that was her art piece to add to the party venue here.
And this is the monitor system.
Yeah, and so this is how all the gear is set up. I don't know how many of you are familiar with how a live sound setup works, but there's a monitor desk here. Then this guy mixes for all the musicians. And hang on, let me let this other person in. And so Steve mixes for all the musicians, and he has the hard job. I just mix for the audience. He's got to make all the musicians on stage happy, you know.
Here's Steve. Hi, Steve. These are all the amplifiers for the PA system.
We just brought a little baby PA in.
And here's my little PA. The baby PA for this show. And these are little front rows. And here's the band setup. This is the drum kit and all the mics. 4 snare drums, 6 toms, 2 bass drums, and all different types of mics. There's the condensers, there's a condenser on the ride cymbal, condensers on the hi-hats, there's the condensers on these toms, there's a big dynamic on the kick.
And by the way, it was about, I'd say 50 degrees. You could see your breath all day long today. I think there's about 24 channels of drum mics alone. This is a crazy kick drum. It's on its side and the beater hits up on it.
And this is what it looks like from the drummer's perspective. And it's a bass player station.
Bass player is so easy, just a bass and a DI.
No amps. They're all used in your monitoring. The sax player, conga, and singer. And this is Steve Lucas's setup. 2 Wagner amps. And then we have our main keyboard player, Xavier. There's this rig, and then Steve, who sings all the high parts and plays second keyboards. There's his rig here. There's a big guitar world back here where all the guitars are tuned and taken care of. And that's kind of it. And then over here, the monitor engineer has the same desk that I have. And it's the same exact console.
So by us having the same consoles, we're able just to use one set of mic pre's and share them. And we don't have to have multiple, so much equipment. It's all the wireless gear.
So for any of you guys that have never been on a tour bus, this is what a tour bus looks like. There's our leftover pizza from last night. But there's a front lounge in the front. We have a nice television, entertainment system here. And then everything is storage all around the bus. There's cabinets underneath. There's drawers under the seats. So you can put all your waters or shoes or whatever you want. There's storage everywhere. Got a little kitchen area with a microwave, a coffee pot, a trash chute there. And over here, a nice bathroom. And a shower. And then all down the center of the bus, we have bunks. So there's 3 levels of bunks. We have 12. This one sleeps 12. And then there's always a back lounge with another television usually. A little table back here. Power on the buses. There's power in the bunks. All the bunks have their own power. It's a tour bus.
So this is where we live when we're on the road, when we're out for a while. And it's usually not full. We usually have about 8 people out of 12 bunks. So there's all these open bunks to put all your bags and stuff like that.
Driver's position. All the luggage goes underneath the bay in the bottom.
Yep, That's it. So that's how I spent my weekend. And we were supposed to have this easy load in and just go right onto the stage and do our show. But it was a blast. We had. I love this stuff. This is what I do. I love making shows and the challenges and our production manager really loves it. Anytime something goes wrong, he goes into hyper gear, and makes all this stuff happen for us. So I just thought maybe you'd like to see a little bit of that.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So for a smaller venue like that, what is obviously like a drum kit and a small venue with a tin roof doesn't necessarily need to be amplified. Are all the microphones for recording purposes mostly?
No, we amplify.
Performance, or
we amplify.
Everything's amplified?
Yeah, because generally I want to hear, first of all, I want to hear reverbs because it's kind of a rock and roll sound to have specific reverbs. So when you hit the tom, it goes, those kind of things.
Yeah.
The cymbals, I did not need any cymbal mics because the room was full of cymbals. And with all the vocals on the stage, every vocal mic becomes a cymbal mic too, So and we need the low end especially because to balance all the energy that's coming off the stage. Luckily, we don't have any monitors on the stage. Everybody's got in-ear monitors. And we just have a pair of subs so they can feel a little low end on the stage. But we try to minimize that as much as possible because the more noise that comes off the stage, the harder it is to control the sound. And that low tin roof, I thought was just going to be impossible, but it actually worked out fine. We had a great show. The audience went nuts. I mean, it was like 60 billionaires there. It was only super wealthy people. There was no normal people there at all, except the chefs and the crew. And, they had a blast. The food looked incredible. Everybody had these giant oysters and these mega courses of meals. And upstairs, they had a giant cigar bar set up. They had these little hand warmers for everybody. They had blankets for everybody. And they had, every kind of swag you can imagine. And the reason that it happened is the guy that the party was for, he was retiring, and he had owned this huge business his whole life, and his son was taking over. And his favorite band ever was Toto his whole life. And so his son surprised him. He had no idea we were there until he walked up the stairs and saw us. And totally flipped out, It was a lot of fun. I like that kind of stuff where it's a surprise,
That's great.
Yeah.
Must be nice. It's like, hey, your favorite band is Toto? Let me just pull them out.
Yeah, exactly.
Come to your party.
Yeah, they're downstairs listening to a DJ and watching films about his life, and then all of a sudden they walk upstairs and there's Toto up there, So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. So now for the serious stuff. How did everybody do with the editing? Everybody did okay? It was a real simple assignment. Hopefully it worked out okay. Anastasia, I put up the Class 6 materials up there also. If you need to grab stuff, they're up in our chat up there. And the Class 7, our stuff for today is up there also. People that are still having problems uploading, get with me and let's figure that out ASAP. If you want to stay on later tonight, we can work on it. So today, before we get into microphones, this week our recording, we're going to have an assignment, and our assignment is due in 2 weeks. It's a very simple assignment. It's just a couple of audio tracks and a couple of MIDI tracks for undergrads, and then a little more for graduate students. So it's nothing hard, but I want you guys to get the recording part of it together, and so we're going to be going over that today. Some of you are more familiar with the equipment than others, so I'm going to kind of go through it from the beginning, the hookup, the whole deal. And we're going to start today with talking about gain structure and level matching. So I've just got this little editing assignment. I just needed some kind of audio. And I'm playing this little piano piece here that you guys edited. So what I want to talk about is making sure from the beginning of your signal to the end of your signal, your audio levels are proper, because it's very easy to get distortion. It's very easy, especially in a digital medium. In an analog medium, when you get distortion, sometimes it can even be good, like guitars distort, or sometimes you push tape a little bit hard and it gets a little compression going. So that kind of thing is okay. But once you're dealing with numbers and you get over the number, over zero, then you get a crackle and a crunch. And you don't want to ever have that anywhere in your chain. So what we want to do is set up proper gain structure. And we want to make sure as we go through and add our inserts, like our guitar pedals, like we did in the guitar diagram, we're going to be adding inserts. And when we do that, we don't want it to have any distortion. I'm going to insert a plug-in, and I've just grabbed this Piano 2 here. So I'm going to insert a plug-in here, and I'm going to insert the EQ3 7-band. And this is just a simple EQ. Some of you are probably familiar with equalizers, and others may not be. Let me zoom back a little bit. So this is an equalizer, and this is a tone-shaping device. As a matter of fact, in the early days, in radio stations, they didn't have much filtering, and they used to call these correctional devices. They weren't equalizers. They were correctional devices. They were only there to fix problems. And if you kind of have that mentality when you're working with music, and you try to get the source correct and use the correct mic and the correct preamp, get your chain correct and all your levels correct, then you don't have to use near as much correction. You don't have to go crazy with equalizing. We'll get more into equalizing when we start doing some mixing stuff, but I just want to quickly go through this plugin with you a little bit. There's an input level and an output level. Right? There's two filters. So there's a high pass filter and there's a low pass filter. And these two filters will do exactly what they say. A high pass filter only allows high end to pass over a certain frequency. Right? So if I engage this filter, you can see very easy. These are your low frequencies down here, and these are your high frequencies up here. And this is how sharp the slope is of this filter. So I'll push it up where you can see it better. So as I move this filter up, it's cutting out low-end information. Right? So the higher I move it, now all the bass is gone, all the kick drum's gone. If I keep going, all the bass guitar is gone. Right? So this is the most simple type of filter, and this is the most useful filter because a lot of instruments will have rumble, and this rumble will get in the microphones and it will cloud the low end of your mix. And on a live soundstage, this is the most important filter you have ever, because the stage can actually feedback and rumble at low frequencies. With instruments that don't have low frequencies, you pretty much want to have this engaged a lot. For example, if a guitar, maybe you don't want any frequencies under 100 hertz with a guitar, because those frequencies will start to clash with the bass, and they'll start to clash with the kick drum, and it'll make what's called masking. And this masking will cloud your mix, and it'll take away clarity. Okay, I'm just kind of going through this quickly, but I want you to understand what this plugin does. Next, we have the low pass filter, which does exactly the opposite. It takes away high frequencies. And you would use this filter for instruments that don't need high frequencies, bass guitar, even electric guitar. You don't need stuff way up here because the guitar speaker doesn't really reproduce those well anyway. Right? And sometimes you have synthesizers, and synthesizers are known to have a very grainy sound up in the higher frequencies like 10K and up. For example, piano samples sound horrible up in those frequencies. And those frequencies can clash with your vocals. So if you control your highs and your lows of any instrument, it's the most natural way to keep your sounds pure. Let's turn these off. But besides that, we have 5 bands of filtering. And these filters are the same as your car stereo. You know, if you've got bass and treble on your car stereo, or bass, mid, and treble, or whatever, it's like that. There's a low mid, a high mid, and a high. And they kind of overlap, so you can take this one and pull it all the way down to here if you want, you know. And these filters enable you to shape the sound and to bring out frequencies that help you cut through the mix, or to pull out frequencies that are clouding the mix. And that's the main objective with EQing. There's more creative things you can do with EQs, but that's general sound mixing. So what I'm going to do to kind of demonstrate how our gain structure works is, if you look at this part of the plugin, there's an input meter and there's an output meter. And whenever you add EQ to a track, you're actually adding volume at a specific frequency, right? So if I take and I take this green EQ here, and let's just listen to the track first, and I'll show you what I mean. So if you look at these EQs, you'll see that the input level and the output level are exactly the same, right? So they're totally matched. What happens when you start adding EQ is you also add volume. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit so it doesn't hurt our ears. So I'm going to start adding some EQ now. And now if you look at our output meter is a lot louder than our input meter. There we go, we got a clip. Whenever we have a clip in a digital format, we are going to be clipping the converters, and we're going to be clipping the master bus. And when that happens, there's really no way to recover from it. And I have very nice converters here in the studio. If you have some cheap converters like your iPhone or something like that, maybe you don't hear the clip here, but you play it on somebody else's system and you're going to hear a crunch. Right? So what we want to do with gain staging is we want to level match. We want to match the output level to the input level after we've made our EQ adjustments. And this is critical. If you don't do this, you can distort all the way down the chain. So once you have it, you can't take it away. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a little of this back, and I'm going to bring my output level down until my input and output are roughly the same. So I'll just start backing it down. I'll zoom in so you can see. Still louder. Okay, that's pretty close. So what you notice when you start boosting high mids and highs, you'll see that the input and output don't behave the same way anymore. Because what you're doing is you're actually boosting frequencies, and those frequencies will stick out. Those frequencies equal notes, and they equal a range of the piano. And so now you're boosting a range of the piano Whereas this might be a warm sound. When you add this, it might be a cold sound or a hard sound. And by boosting these things, you're adding volume and you're adding emphasis on a certain range of the keyboard, right? So that's the reason that it's not going to be exactly the same, but you want it to be, you want your levels to be kind of floating around -10. And if you look at these levels here again, you'll notice that there's the kind of solid part here, and then up here is the little floating things. And when you stop playing, those floating things will go away. And those are peak indicators. So audio has a transient, it's called. And this transient is usually the initial attack of the note, or it is the initial attack of the note. And certain instruments have very loud transients, like drums and piano. And these transients, if you're not paying attention, if you didn't see those little peak meters, then you could actually be clipping, because it looks like the rest of the signal is down here, right? But once you start turning things up, you'll get distortion, and you can get peaks that are sneaking through. So that's the reason we use these peak meters. So let me show you what this sounds like. So if I keep adding EQ, hear how it's starting to square off now? So this was recorded pretty low, so I'd have to add even more EQ to make it happen. But the point is that we're starting to clip. So that's one part of gain staging. You know, there's all of these different levels as you go through your recording process. The first thing you have to get right is your mic level. And you have to have your mic level before any EQ or anything else sitting at the right area of this. And so for drums, about as high as I'll peak is about -6. That's where my peaks would go for their highest. And for other instruments, I want to keep it down even lower because I want to keep the signal as clean as I can. All right, so the other thing that happens is this is just one track. Right? If I take this one track, you know, I showed you how to use clip gain the other day, which is this little fader here beside the waveform. So you can distort at the plug-in. I'm going to turn the plug-in off for a second. But if you start playing with the gain here, you can also distort here. You can see your clipping here. Let me turn it down more. And you can see here, these are your output meters up here. And you can see the red lights are flashing. So you always want to be watching your meters. And you always want to make sure that you're not hitting the bus so hard that you're crunching in any way. Because it's only math. And once you get past a certain amount, it's going to distort. So if you turn up your clip gain too much, you can distort. If you turn up your EQ too much, you can distort. Let me show you one more thing. I'm going to take this track. Oops. And I'm going to duplicate it 20 times. Okay, so all of these tracks are at a safe level. Every track is at a safe level. I'm going to make a master fader here. And I'm going to turn it down just so we don't hurt our ears. I'm going to put all these tracks back at 0. Okay. And then as we start adding tracks together, we're also adding volume to our master bus. And so even though all these tracks are safe and recorded well, as we start building, it's going to get louder and louder and louder. We get the master going the right place. So we're starting to distort. Right? So they sum together. It's just straight math. It's addition. Every time you add tracks, you're adding together in straight math. So as you add more tracks, if you have them at a level that's a little too hot, you're going to have to start turning things down. If your level is too hot going into your plugin, right, you can turn it down here. The first stage is the mic pre. If it's too hot at the mic pre, you turn the mic pre down. If it's too hot from a recording, and this happens a lot with loop-based music, because guys print loops all the way up. You know, they're peaking at right below 0 all the time. And so what you have to do is you have to actually grab that loop before it hits a compressor or before it hits a plugin and pull it down. If you don't, then your compressor doesn't behave correctly, and your other plugins don't behave correctly. So this is the chain that I'm talking about, and this is crucial for having a clean recording. All right, so that's gain staging, right? Keeping things at a nominal level, and then this master is going to be your judge of how loud everything is. Your master should sit at 0. And then you can watch your meters and see where things are starting to distort. So if you see red, something's wrong, you got to go through and bring everything down or find the problem. The other thing to remember about this, if we look at the mixer window, a lot of people, when they see red, like if this plugin is too hot, let's get rid of all these extra ones here so we don't have all that going on. So if we have our piano here, and let's pretend like this was really loud, recorded. The first reaction of most people to fix this problem is to grab this fader and turn it down. Okay? That doesn't work because you're actually distorting before this fader. The same with the master bus. If your master bus is starting to clip, you can't bring down this fader because you've already clipped. You're summing all those tracks together, and it's already clipping before this fader. So bringing down your master fader isn't going to fix the distortion either. You have to follow the signal flow, and you have to follow the chain. And that chain is first your recording, and then your waveform. If you're working with tracks that are pre-recorded or loops, you turn them down here first before they hit your compressors and EQs. And then you follow your EQ chain. If you add an EQ and you boost, then you're going to have to bring down your output level so you're not distorting this plugin. And the way to test that is to listen. And you can play back a piano track and you can bypass and unbypass and bypass and unbypass. And you have to find out where it sounds the same. And you follow the signal flow all the way down. And until the very end. When you get to the master bus and maybe you want it to be as loud as the records you hear on the radio, that's when you can start boosting the overall level. And when you do that, you have to use special plugins called limiters, and we'll get into those a little bit later. But it's crucial that you keep your levels within a certain range. And the thicker the music, the more low mids in the music, the easier it is to distort. All right, so next I'm going to switch over here. I just wanted to go over that because a few of the projects were, by the way, a lot of the sequencing projects were just great. I had so much fun, man. I loved them. But you're getting on the hairy edge of distortion. And so that's the kind of the reason that I wanted to go through this, because some of you guys are using some advanced techniques, which I appreciate, and I love the fact that you know about them. I just want to make sure that we keep things under control. All right. So since we're going to be recording audio, and I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with audio interfaces, I want to talk about our little audio interfaces. Which one do you guys have? Do you have the Focusrite 2x2, or is it the Focusrite Solo? Which one is it? Which one did the school provide you?
I have my own. I have a Focusrite 2x2.
Okay, great. And did everybody pick up their recording kits from the school? By the way, from Justin? Has anybody not picked them up? If not, then let's get that going because we're going to start recording audio. So
we have our own. Do I need to get that one from the school?
No, but you do need a microphone.
Yeah, I've got a microphone also.
And a windscreen? Do you have a windscreen?
Like a pop filter?
Uh-huh. Yeah, great. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a Shure SM7B.
Nice. That's Metallica was playing. That's what they use in the studio to record their voices with.
Nice. Yeah, I got it for vocal recording.
Yeah, it's a great. That's a dynamic mic, and it's a really nice one. You know, it's a good mic. So you have your little audio interfaces, right? And let's see, I had a diagram somewhere. Oops, that's back to my Mexican food. Here we go. So in the school kits, could somebody tell me which interface it is, just so I talk about the right one? Is it the Scarlett with 2 mic pre's on the front or just 1? This is the Solo one.
I think it has 2. It says Scarlett 2, 2i2. I think it has 2.
Okay, so we have this. Is it this one or is it this one?
It's the second one. Like
Great.
It has two mics.
Great, excellent. So this one also has MIDI on it, which is really nice. If you did have any external MIDI keyboards, then you could use your MIDI tracks in Pro Tools and trigger an external keyboard with it. But let's talk about these little interfaces and how you hook them up. Your assignment, I don't know if you've looked at your assignment yet for this week, but it's very simple, and you're just wide open to do what you want. I just want to see you record audio. So if you have a guitar, you could bring a guitar directly in here, or you can bring in a microphone, and those happen at different levels. There's an instrument level and a mic level. And so if you look down here, you see a little switch. It says instrument level and mic level. And I can't see what that says. I think that's a pad. So if you have an instrument that's coming in too loud, and you have your mic pre all the way down here, down towards the bottom, and it still seems loud, you can engage this pad button, and it'll turn it down. I'm not sure if it's a 10 dB pad or a 20 dB pad. There's all different pads. And it just means that it knocks that amount of volume off at the front end. So you want to run your mic pre's, up in this level or maybe a little hotter if you have a dynamic mic. And you can adjust from guitar to mic with this switch. The next part here, these look like MIDI and USB indicators to tell you that you're connected to MIDI or USB. And this is called phantom power. And this is required for certain microphones. And we're going to talk a lot about mics today. but these are for condenser mics, and so they need power and able to work. Over here, you have something called direct monitoring. And what happens with DAWs is when you have your playback engine set, anything above 128, you're going to start to hear latency. And it'll sound like either chorusing, or you'll hear your voice happen like a split second after you're singing, right? And it can be distracting for people. So what this device has is it has this direct monitor. And what you can do is you can balance between what's playing back from Pro Tools. So if you were recording a vocal, for example, and I had my vocal down here, and I hit record, I could just mute this track while I'm recording, and then I'm only hearing my direct sound. And this knob is just a blend knob. It lets you know how much of Pro Tools you're hearing and how much of your direct sound. So that enables you to play and record latency free. Because whenever you use a buffer by definition is adding latency. And so the more buffer you use, the more latency you're going to hear. And it can be very distracting, especially if you're playing rhythmic parts. If you try to play a slap bass line and you have too high of a buffer set, then you're going to hear this weird attack thing. And it'll drive you nuts, and it's hard to play to it. And so that's the reason that we have this knob here. Okay. This is going to be your speaker volume when you hook up your speakers. And then this, I believe this is your headphone volume here. So when we hook up our interface, it's just a USB cable, and you take your USB cable and you plug it in. And it powers up and it does its thing, right? And you're going to have a mic volume on it. And you're going to have your output volume. Your output's going to come out these speaker outputs here. And you'll hook those into your whatever amplifier is controlling your speakers, or if you have powered speakers, you can probably just plug directly in and use that monitor knob on the front to adjust the volume. So you've got your computer going into USB, and you have your output coming into your speakers from these balanced outputs here. And theirs looks like they're unbalanced also. They have two sets of outputs. And you plug in your guitars here, and you can plug in your headphones in the front. You can't monitor in Pro Tools through your computer speakers when you're using an audio interface. So you have to plug in your headphones in order to hear it, or have speakers hooked up. All right. And this playback engine, this buffer deal here, what happens is the more plugins you use, or the more sophisticated libraries you use, the more buffer it's going to require in order to play those samples back, or in order to use those more sophisticated plugins. So in general, you don't want to put too many heavy-duty plugins on while you're first recording. You want to try to keep it as light as possible so you can keep this buffer down and minimize latency. I know there's a lot of terminology that if you're not familiar with it, it can get confusing. So just jump in there anytime if you have any questions. I have no problem. So also, if you have these little interfaces, you got a Mac, sometimes you'll need a USB-C to this regular USB adapters. Let's talk about the hardware also involved. So this is a microphone cable. All right. And this microphone cable is what we call a balanced cable. And a balanced cable means that it has 3 conductors as opposed to 2. There's a ground, and there's a hot and a cold. And those hot and cold cables are wrapped around each other inside this wire, and they phase cancel out noise. So anytime you have a choice between using what's called a balanced signal or an unbalanced signal, you should always go balanced because it's going to be less noise. Guitars. This is called an XLR cable, by the way. And if you ever want to take these apart, like these just unscrew here, and you can actually look inside and you can see your connections and make sure they're soldered properly. Mm-hmm. You just line this little circle up with this little tab here. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's a little circle here, and that fits right in this little tab. And then you slide the top on, and it's got a little groove inside it. And so this little top hole lines up with this little tab deal there. And you can just slide it back in and screw this back on. So if your cable doesn't work, it's really easy to check XLR cables and make sure they're okay. This is a guitar cable, and this uses 1/4-inch phono jacks. And these connectors just unscrew, and you can see the connections inside those too. And you can check your soldering. You can check and see. Sometimes these wires break loose. It's very easy to fix them, very easy to work on. And this is an unbalanced cable. Guitars have very, very low output. And they use these unbalanced cables, and they have to be amplified before you can do anything with the signal. So back to our XLR for a second. XLR cables balance signal is at a much louder level than consumer plugs. So this cable is called an RCA cable. And it's these little guys, with the little prongs in the center. This is consumer grade stereo equipment. It's not professional grade. It runs at a much softer operating system, or operating level, sorry. So this runs at -10 dB, and these balanced cables run at +4. So there's a lot more juice there, and the more juice, the less noise. That's another reason balanced cables are better than using these consumer guys. If you look at this little guy, this is the one we all know from our headphones. And this is also a phono plug. And this is a 1/8" stereo. You can see here there's 2 little lines. All right, this is the ground, and then you have your left and right pins. And that's called a mini plug. And what else here? Oh, here's something fun. You have to know, this is required by every musician, you need to know how to roll your cables, okay? Your cables will last 100 times longer if you roll them properly, right? If you don't roll them properly, if you just wad them up like this and you put them in your bag, they're going to break, right? So there's a specific technique for rolling cables. It's called under-over. And there's a lot of great stuff about this technique. And the way that it works is you're holding your cable. So if you guys grab a cable, you should really learn this. Grab a cable and let's learn this if you have one. You're going to hold it so the cable connector is facing down in your hand. You're going to roll the cable, make a loop. as you make a loop with this hand, you're twisting the cable, right? So you're guiding the cable to be rolled properly. The other hand, the next loop, you do in reverse. You grab it from underneath and you roll. So that's called over-under. Again, first one just goes straight up and you're twisting the cable to make it roll itself. See? The next one, you take your hand and you turn it backwards and you grab it from underneath and you pull it up and make the second loop. And then you do it again. Over, under. I taught my kids to do this when they were 8. And then they went on gigs with me and they helped me roll up mic cables. Right? So I know it's a basic thing. It's critical. It will make your cables last so much longer. The other great thing is if you roll an over cable, I can have a mic cable that's 100 feet long, and I can take that mic cable and I can throw it, and it shoots out straight. And I do it all the time. I measure big arenas, and I can take 100 feet of cable and I can throw it, and about 90% of it will shoot out just as straight as an arrow. And that's all by proper technique, proper over-under technique. And I can wind cables faster like that than any other way. A lot of people do this. This is really bad for cables, That'll destroy them. So you want to make sure that you have one turn going one way, one turn going the other. One turn going one way, one turn going the other. I even do that with my iPhone earbuds. This is Studio Fundamentals. This is what I'm supposed to teach you guys. Right? Okay. I've got a list here of things I'm supposed to show you. Okay, so we talked about balanced and unbalanced levels, right? We talked about -10 and +4. There's a couple of other type of levels. Speaker level. You never want to combine a pro audio level with a speaker level. Speaker levels are already amplified, and you'll destroy your audio equipment if you take an output from an amplifier that's supposed to go to a speaker and you plug it into something else. You can fry some stuff. So be careful with that. Let's see here. Boy, what else we got? Mic stands. All right. Everybody knows how to put together a mic stand, I assume. That's not a biggie. You know, the things you want to be sure with the mic stands are the fulcrum, the fulcrum of the mic stand. And if you have a heavy microphone, I have these guys. It's a sandbag. So if I had a heavy microphone and I needed to extend it very far, I could grab my microphone, I could extend it far. It's going to want to droop, right? If I hang a sandbag on the end, it's not. So whenever you set up any microphone stand, all those drum mics, we had 24 drum mics on that Toto kit. Every mic stand, I am completely anal about making sure that I have it balanced. If you don't do it, as the drummer plays throughout the night, the mic is going to fall and it's going to end up on top of the drum. And then it sounds horrible, right? So if you're putting a mic stand up, first of all, the other thing is don't move this mic stand without loosening stuff. You'll wear them out, right? So you need to move it, loosen it first. A lot of guys just grab a mic stand and wank on it and pull on it, and you destroy the mic stands, and they're expensive. Always loosen all the knobs, and then when you're done, tighten them really nice and snug. And especially this one that rotates, this thing here. Make sure that's nice and snug, and then you can tighten the level adjusting. And same with the bottom. Basic stuff, but crucial. Let's see here. When you start doing your recordings, it's equally important your mic placement and your room sound. So if you're recording in a bathroom, your recording is going to sound like a bathroom, and you can't take it back away, right? If you're recording in a studio that's treated, then you're going to have much more control over your sound. And there's a lot of easy ways to fix this. The cheapest, easiest way is blankets and packing blankets. You can take anything up, if you're going to do a vocal, and you hang it behind you. If you look around my room, you can see these wooden panels. I don't know if you can see them in the shot. Yeah, there's one over here with an Indonesian thing hanging on it. These are sound absorbers, and they're 4 inches of insulation inside a wooden frame. And I can take these gobos like we talked about in the studio, and I can take these and I can put them behind a vocalist. So you have your vocal mic in front of you, and then you have the gobos behind you. The vocal mic is picking up towards you. So any reflections that are coming off those back walls are going right back in that mic. And it's going to make your mic sound roomy and not good, unless you're going for that. If you're in a concert hall and you want a classical sound, that's something different. But we're talking about trying to record in your house where you don't really have control like you want to. So you have to build control in. You have to figure out some way to deaden that sound. And if you just do a test recording, get in your room and record without it, and then put a blanket behind you. I use packing blankets. Put a packing blanket behind you and listen to the difference in your voice, and you'll hear it immediately. Guitars also, acoustic guitars. Same thing. Next week. I had a video. Pete Calandra did a video on inexpensive ways to treat your room. And it's really helpful, you know, just experiment around with it. You'll hear the difference right away. All right, so next let's go over to microphones a little bit. All right, what's a microphone? Everybody knows what a microphone is. It's a device that converts sound waves into electricity. It's a transducer. We've talked about mics before. All mics have some kind of diaphragm, which is a plastic or a metal thin sheet that resonates from the vibrations that are caused by sound waves. And when a diaphragm vibrates, the sound is converted to electrical signal, and that signal mirrors the sound wave almost exactly. So that electrical signal will look just like those sine waves. And that's the reason we have waveforms, right? So the air molecules are moving, and the sine wave is a representation of that going back and forth. And all mics put out a pretty low voltage, and they have to be amplified before you can use them. That's what a mic preamp, and that's what that knob is for your volume on your mic, on your interface. So there's different types of mics, and we're gonna hear a bunch of these. So there's passive microphones, which are these dynamic mics, and we talked about the speaker, and we talked about how there's a magnet, and then so there's a magnet, and there's a coil, an electromagnet, and by the airwaves moving in and out, it changes a magnetic field, and that's converted into electricity and passed down the wire. Right, simple stuff. What do we know about dynamics? Well, they're less expensive. It's great. You can buy a great dynamic microphone for $100. You can drop them and they don't break. They're very robust. They don't pick up a lot of background noise. That's the reason we use them so much in live sound, because they don't pick up everything else that's going on the stage. They only pick up what they're close to. They have a slower transient response. What does this mean? It means that they automatically soften hard transients just because they're slow. So if you have a drum hit and you mic that same drum hit with either a condenser or a dynamic, the dynamic is going to have a softer attack. And when you're mixing, you always have to take care of your transients. And the other thing about them is they handle loud signals and they don't distort. So you can distort the mic preamp, but it's almost impossible to distort a dynamic mic. You can put it very close to a drum and it's not going to distort. You can put it right on a guitar amp. It's not going to distort. And these are the features that, really, really make these mics crucial. And so, so this is just a diagram talking about how they work. Because we've been over this. This is exactly the same as that speaker that I showed you. It just works in reverse. And this is what a handheld looks like. It's the same thing, only the diaphragm is in front here. And it's got the magnet in the back, and it's got the coil. And it just goes out to your XLR cable. Very simple design. Very easy to work on. Very easy to clean. Everything about them. So now we have condenser microphones. Condenser microphones need power. They need electricity, either a battery or phantom power, in order to work. And because they require power, they're called active microphones. They're much, much more sensitive. They distort easy. So you have to be careful and not put them too close to loud instruments like drums. If you put one right on the drum head, you're going to distort the mic before it even hits the mic pre. You won't have any control. Singers can do this. Singers can get too close to a condenser microphone and distort it with the pressure of their voice. I did some stuff for years ago. I did post work on Pavarotti, and he did these Pavarotti and Friends concerts, and every person in the world would come up, and all the pop stars, Britney Spears and Mariah Carey and whoever else was famous at the time would come up and sing with Pavarotti. Pavarotti had these incredibly high SPL, high SPL microphones made by Sheps, I think, made the microphones. And they were 2 feet from him. And he could still distort the microphones. His voice was so loud in his head, Pavarotti ended up going deaf, not because of loud PA systems, but because of the voice volume inside his head. That's what caused him to go deaf. They have a much faster response than dynamic mics. And this is really good for detail. If you want to get the fast attack of something like a drum or wind chime or cymbals, they're really good for high frequencies. And they can pick up all the details of a sound. They're great for recording orchestras. And they're very accurate at reproducing sound. But they're really fragile too. You drop one, you can be out a lot of money really quick. And studio condenser mics, the vintage mics, they can be $30,000, $40,000 for old mics that they don't make anymore. So in the studio, I was just recording a trio of R&B girls. And one of the girls, I had two, $25,000, $30,000 microphones set up in front of them. I had a vintage Telefunken 251 and I had a vintage U47. And one of the girls, she tried one. She said, "Oh, I like this one better. Oh, I like this." And she decided on one mic. And she grabs the other stand and just swings this mic. And the entire control room just went, it's, what the heck are you doing? And she's, she didn't have any idea what she was doing. But we all ran for the door. The assistant engineer and I just both ran for the door and bolted out there to make sure that thing didn't fall over. It's like a car. The other thing about them is they're expensive. The manufacturing of a condenser mic is expensive. So you don't find as many cheap microphones that are high quality These days, their manufacturing has gotten a lot cheaper than when I started. So you have to be careful with condensers. And we talked about how these work. We don't have to go back over this again, but there's a sound waves at a front plate, and there's a back plate, and the electrical charge in between the two is what causes the microphone to work. Large diaphragm condenser mics. Anything above 3/4 of an inch is considered a large diaphragm. Large diaphragms have less noise than small diaphragms. And they add color, and they make things sound big. So if you wanted to, if you're maybe a country singer and you want your voice to be very big, and this is a condenser microphone. So if you get on top of it, you can get that very, rich, big sound on it. And they're good for acoustic guitars. They're great for horns. I use them on saxophones a lot. They're good for strings. I also use small diaphragms for strings, but they're very good for strings. Almost always for vocals. And you can use them for certain parts of drums, overheads. And I put one in front of a kick drum sometimes. But you just have to remember that you can't get them too close to the instrument or you'll distort the capsule. And so here's what a microphone looks like. The microphone that I'm speaking in right now is this microphone. And it's an Audio-Technica 4050. I don't know how much it costs, maybe $1,000, $800. I'm not sure what they cost now. I bought them a while ago. And this is what the inside of a microphone looks like, in case you're curious. So small diaphragm condensers. They're really good at recording fine detail, and they're very accurate. So if you're doing a classical recording, I'll show you some of my classical mics over here. They're very expensive, but they're very natural sounding, and they pick up the ambience of a room incredibly well, and there's no coloration. They're very pristine. They're very fast. They're very natural sounding, and they're great for cymbals. They're great for hi-hats. Great for orchestra mics. I use them on acoustic guitars a lot. It's a brighter sound. You can use a large diaphragm on acoustic guitar also. It's a warmer sound. It depends on what you're going for. And I almost always use them on piano. Especially in a live situation. In the studio, I will use a large diaphragm microphone because usually I'm working with a jazz artist and we want a big, fat piano sound, like a jazz trio type of thing. If you're doing a rock recording, maybe you don't want so much. And then we have ribbon mics, and we talked about how ribbon mics work. It's a U-shaped magnet, and it's got a piece of metal suspended between the two magnets of the U. Incredibly fragile. You drop one of those, it's gone. They have a really, really low output, so they have to be amplified a lot. And they have a really warm, beautiful sound to them. And the other thing, they're less sensitive to high frequencies, but the thing about it is they're also incredibly smooth. So if you have a microphone and you're recording a male voice with a ribbon microphone, and you don't think it's bright enough, when you brighten it up later with an EQ, it does it in a very beautiful way. It doesn't get harsh. It always maintains this real silkiness to it. I always use these for trumpets, for trombones, for a lot of brass instruments because they have a splatty sound and a bright sound. What comes out of a bell of a trumpet is not what a trumpet sounds like 10 feet away. There's a lot of stuff coming out. With ribbon mics, you always want to use a windscreen. The ribbons are incredibly delicate, and just a puff of air can damage the ribbons. So for a trumpet or for a vocal, always have a windscreen in front of them. They have a really warm, beautiful sound. I love them. They're really nice. They're also really good for drum room sounds. I always use, I have a pair of these Cole microphones that I always use for drum rooms. Because usually with the drum room sound, you don't want a lot of cymbal energy. You want it to be more of the drums or the beef, And that's what a ribbon looks like. And we're going to talk about patterns, polar patterns, soon. Next, I think. And that's what a ribbon looks like, a diagram of one. Okay, shotgun microphones. So shotgun microphones are mainly used in the film industry. They have specialized uses in other things, but they're the ones that you always see on the poles, and they have a very the length of a shotgun microphone controls how much width it will pick up. So it's incredibly directional. If you have a long shotgun, it may only pick up 30 degrees of width. So it's like a cone. And so when you point it at somebody, it's like you have an umbrella over them. And you're either picking up this much of the scene or this much of the scene or this much of the scene. And it all has to do with how long that microphone is. You always see them on film sets. And for television, too, you see them sometimes. But a lot of times they use these other mics that we're going to talk about next. This is what a shotgun looks like on the inside. So you have what's called an interference tube. And a shotgun microphone is this long microphone, and it has these slots on the side. I have one over here. I'll show you in a minute. And the sound comes in from the end, and it goes down this tube to the capsule. And the longer this interference tube is, the less angle the microphone will pick up. So there's short shotguns, which have a wider angle, and then there's longer shotguns. I use these for audience mics also when I'm doing DVDs for live concerts. Lavalier mics are just the little mics that you see that people clip on their shirts when you're doing television shows. They can be either omni or cardioid. And this is what they look like. There's all sorts of little designs here. All sorts of guys here. And they're commonly used with these little wireless transmitters. And you can buy these. As a matter of fact, I'm about to buy a set of these. You can buy them with lavaliers, so you have two people that can have dialogue back and forth. And then this will plug directly into your DSLR camera. And you can do dialogue recording and have one track of each one. And they're very good. You have to be careful where you position them. If you get it too much under your neck, then it sounds like this. You don't have any enunciation anymore in your voice. So when you position a microphone, you want to make sure it's down far enough that it's not under your throat and your head is not actually blocking the microphone. And the other thing is you want to make sure that when you position it, you don't have it too far under your shirt or have anything rattly around it. Girls with earrings. That's another big one. Girls with dangly earrings in the studio can ruin a recording faster than anything. And you may not hear it because you may be listening to something else. But if they get dangly earrings, tell them to take them off before they sing. And we talked briefly about polar patterns. We're going to do a demonstration of that today in a little microphone lab thing I got set up over here. But we've talked about these patterns, and we'll go over them a little bit. Tube mics. So tube microphones are probably my favorites. And tube mics have a vacuum tube inside and the mic, which amplifies the signal. And they really have a pleasing color to them. They have that kind of big, vintagey, warm, smooth sound. But they require a separate power supply. It can't just use phantom power. They have their own little brick. If I had one microphone that I could only use one microphone for the rest of my life, it would be this microphone. This is a Neumann U67, and it sounds great on everything. But it has a big tube inside it, and in order to power it, you have to have this brick. And this is the power for the Neumann U67. This is a multi-pattern mic. You can change different patterns with it. And speaking of that, there's a bunch of switches on microphones, and they do different things. There's switches that change from omni to cardioid and figure eight. So you can have a mic that does 3 different patterns. And there's also mics that have a variable switch that you can do things in between. There's a pad switch, just like the pad on the front of your mic pre we were talking about. A lot of microphones, condensers I'm talking about mainly, have a pad on them so you don't distort. And this microphone that I'm using here has all of those things on it. So you can see, right? This is Omni now. Yeah, so I can show you the switches. So right here, there's a switch that switches from Omni to figure 8 to cardioid. Okay. Back in. On the back of the microphone, there's a pad switch here, so you can make it have a softer response. And then over here is a roll-off switch, so you can turn the bass down or turn the bass up. And this helps with something called proximity effect that we're going to go through. Sorry about the pop. It does that when you change patterns. So we have the pad switch, and we have a high-pass switch, which, like I showed you the high-pass filter on the EQ. That's exactly what this does. It's a switch, and they usually have either 1 or 2 settings, and they're set at specific frequencies, like 75 hertz and 150 hertz. And these enable you, before you actually get to a computer or anything else, you can cut out low end. I always use them on cymbals. I can use them on guitars sometimes, acoustic guitars. And they're really useful tools. And the pad switch you need if you're going to record something loud, like if you're going to put a condenser on on maybe a crash cymbal, or maybe you're going to put it on a snare drum or something like that. You can put that pad on there and keep it from distorting. There's also some mic accessories and windscreens. Somebody was asking me what the weird looking thing was in there. Hang on, let me grab my... So this is another mic. This is just the same mic that I'm using. It's a 150. So this, check this out. My good windscreens at the studio. This is a homemade windscreen from probably 1980s. And it's an embroidery hoop. And it's got a knee-high stocking. I used a new one. Don't worry, it's not a used knee-high stocking, but it's got a knee-high stocking stretched over it. Right? This is a modern windscreen that fits right over my microphone. But this one works better. So if the whole point of a windscreen is to stop those plosives from coming through when you say your P's and your B's. And so, right? You always need a windscreen when you're doing any kind of vocals. You can use a foam windscreen, but the foam windscreen changes the sound a lot more. It filters the high end. Foam windscreens are good for outdoors when it's very windy outside. But a simple embroidery hoop like this does the trick. It's another windscreen. It's called a dead cat. And the dead cat windscreen they use for shotgun microphones usually in film work. Sometimes they'll even put them on lavaliers. And it's just fake fur. But it's long, and the fur rattles, and the microphone capsule doesn't. So foam windscreens, I only recommend for windy conditions outdoors. I wouldn't use one in the studio. You need one of these clamp-style wood screens. So when you put a windscreen on a mic, there's a couple of things you can do with these. If you want to get this mic's not on, I'm just using for an example. If you want to get a very close vocal sound, like you want to get up in here. You want to get up in here. You can put the windscreen close as long as the singer's not going to sing loud. If you have a singer that always gets too close to the mic, what I do is I take my windscreen and I put it on a separate mic stand. And I'll back that windscreen back. So she's only able to sing that close to the mic. Even if she bumps her nose into it, it's going to help you as a recording engineer or as a producer or whatever, get a better take out of an artist that gets too close to a microphone. So my general rule of thumb when I'm singing is, if you move the windscreen, I want a vocalist to be about that far away from a microphone when they're singing, about a hand's distance spread out a little bit. And that's a good starting point. If they're doing something really sensitive, you can get them in closer to the microphone. But once you start doing that, you have to be really aware of noises, and all sorts of stuff starts coming through the microphone. So the closer you get, the more intimate it is, but also the more noises you have. And especially if you're working with some languages, Brazilian singers, a lot of their sounds in their words have these type of noises to them. And so if you get the microphone too close, you're going to pick up all these things, and they're almost impossible to get rid of once you have them on tape. So even if you want a sensitive sound, you back them off a little bit. The next thing are shock mounts. So this is a shock mount, and I'll show you on this one. So what it is, it's basically, they're kind of like hair ties, right? They're these nylon things, and they just loop over little hooks here. You can take them off if you want to take it apart, right? And you can replace these little things, but they actually suspend the microphone in this little loop. And that helps a lot with handling noise. So those little taps, if I stomp on the floor, if I didn't have this on, those would be incredibly loud. So suspension mounts for condenser microphones are almost completely a must. Especially you start getting to large diaphragms, they get more sensitive, and any kind of noise, any kind of stepping on the floor, bumping into a mic stand, dancing around, can be picked up by the microphone. I also have so you can buy these too. These are for small microphones. And this is a universal shock mount. And what you do is you take a microphone, and you just weave the microphone through the center of all these rubber bands. Takes a second, but you go through each layer of rubber bands and you just weave it through the center, and then it comes out, and it's suspended also in between. And it'll get you a much cleaner recording. Anytime I'm doing, any chance I get, I'm using a shock mount. And these are cheap, it's not a big deal. All right. Proximity effect. Okay, we're going to demonstrate this too. Proximity effect is just as you get closer to a microphone, you have more bass response. So that's how you get that DJ sound. A normal microphone might be here. When you start moving the mic in close, you get more and more bass, and then you can sound like a DJ, And the microphones that do this the most are cardioid microphones. Omni, if I switch this mic to Omni, I'll show you. So here I am, radio DJ. If I switch this to Omni, as I get closer, it doesn't get that big bottom, right? It just gets closer. So that's proximity effect. And these things are a problem for me with live sound also, because singers, as they go from different ranges of their voice, male singers especially, when they start singing low notes, they're always going to be singing close to the mic because they don't want to have any. They want to get as much signal to noise as possible, and you don't want to get a lot of bleed from other instruments. So they're always close to the microphone, and by always being close as they go down on lower notes, those lower notes stick out more than the upper notes. And so I have to use specialty devices, specialty types of compressors, multiband compressors, and things like that to tame that. The other way to do that is to use a high-pass filter. So you actually just cut those low frequencies out of the microphone for live sound. For recording, you don't want to do that so much. You want to have the control and the flexibility later. Okay, and then the other thing is on-axis and off-axis. So what that means is, if you have a microphone and you have a source, on-axis is pointing directly at the source. Off-axis is at an angle to the source. And it can be an angle here, it can be an angle here, it can be an angle here, on-axis, off-axis. Right? I had a theater stage manager that used to teach students how to sing in the microphone. And her saying was, ice cream cone, microphone. Ice cream cone, microphone. So that was her little way to remind her theater students, this is not an ice cream cone. This is a microphone. Okay, so that's a little tip for you. So let's see here. This can actually be useful for a lot of things, though. Let me get my screen. If you have a trumpet, for example, there's a lot of energy that comes right out of the bell. And if you take the microphone and you angle it away from that bell in some way, you can get a more natural sound. The sound changes the more you angle it. And I'll show you that in a minute too. As you start angling, you get less highs and lows. And it becomes kind of a thinner sound, but it's desirable sometimes, and a lot of times, even for guitar amps, you can put things off axis and you can play with the mic position. Don't ever be afraid to. Don't just stick with one thing. Try stuff, Next, I'm going to have to rearrange stuff here. Just give me a second. So I've set up my little laboratory here. Since we can't meet together in a studio and actually do this stuff together, I thought it'd be fun to do it this way. So what I have here is a lot of different microphones. This is just kind of some random collection of a bunch of my mics. All right. All of these microphones, not this one, but all of these other microphones are all dynamic microphones. And they all have different sounds to them. And people think that a dynamic microphone, just because it's a simple microphone, they're not going to sound that different. But what I have here is, let's see, how should I do this? I have a speaker set up, and I want to show you the difference in the patterns using the speaker. But maybe I'll just go through and talk down some of these different microphones first and let you hear, and I'll tell you a little bit about the different microphones and what they're used for. Check, check. Check, 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 check. Okay, check, check, 1, 2. All right, so this is probably the most common microphone on the planet. This is an SM57. It's made by Shure, and this is what it sounds like. This microphone is the only microphone I've ever been allowed to use on Steve Lukather's guitar amp. He was working in the 70s and 80s. He's tried every microphone in the world, and this is the only microphone he'll ever let me use. This is also one of the only snare drum microphones I use. You can use it on toms. You can sing in it. You can use it on guitar amps. Always on snare drums. You can put one on the top. You can put one on the bottom. They have a very focused sound, and they're incredibly consistent. The only problem with these microphones is it has this little plastic cap. And this cap can get loose. And once it gets loose, it can start to rattle. Right, so that's SM57, the workhorse microphone. This microphone is called a Beta 58. There's another microphone that looks just like this, and it's called an SM58. And it has basically the same capsule as this, but it's just got the round windscreen, so it's nicer to sing in. This microphone is designed for vocals, and it has a very specific rejection so that you can have one monitor on each side of you, and there's null points on the microphone so you can turn it up loud without feeding back. It has a boost at like 5K and 10K, so it's got a lot of that sparkly stuff up there, right? This is a unique microphone. This microphone is a Sennheiser 421. And this mic is the tom-tom mic for every record in the 70s and 80s. You see these, and if you look back at all the recordings, any recording session, you'll always see these mics. And they look real funny because they always have them positioned kind of like that. And the thing that's interesting about these mics is that they have a switch on the bottom, and there's an M and there's an S. Right. M stands for music, S stands for speech, and there's detented clicks in between. And this is a high-pass filter. So you can hear as I turn this, the bottom starts going away. Test, 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 test. So that's a high-pass filter built into the mic. People that are not used to using these microphones forget and leave it on S, and they try to record something, and it sounds thin and awful, and they think the microphone is broken. All you have to do is put it back on M, and then you have a full recording sound. I never used the high-pass on this microphone in my life. Whenever you use it, make sure it's set on M. But it's a great mic. They're really durable. I've used them for live vocals on stage. You can get a little more bottom out of a voice. And the other thing that's very unusual about these mics is the clip design. Right, so it slides out. It's got this little weird contraption here. These are ridiculously expensive. It's a horrible design. So you slide it back in. Now what happens, they always turn these microphones upside down like this, and they put them on drums. Inevitably, somebody touches that button, and the microphone falls off and falls onto the drum. So most of the time that you see people using these a lot, they put the clip in there, and they put a little piece of tape on it to hold it in and make sure it doesn't fall out. Great microphones. Really, really good. Still one of my favorite Tom microphones today if I'm not using condensers. This is a microphone called a Beyer 201. And this microphone is another great Tom microphone. It's great because it has a lot of bottom, and it has a lot of rejection. So if you point it at a tom, it's not going to pick up a lot of cymbals. Right? It's going to pick up what it's pointed at. I also use it on snare in place of this microphone quite a bit. And I love it. It's a great, great microphone. It's a fatter snare sound. It gives you a bigger snare sound. But it still has a lot of focus. This microphone is called a Sennheiser 609. Again, these are all dynamics. This microphone is designed to be hung in front of a guitar amp. So it's completely flat. Whenever you have guitar players dancing around the stage and doing their rock moves and stuff, and you have a microphone sticking off an amp, they're going to bump it. And once they move it, you don't hear the guitar anymore. This microphone's designed to be hung in front of a cabinet. So if I have a cabinet, it hangs flat. It doesn't get bumped. If it gets bumped, it just swings a little bit and goes right back into place. And this is a beefier mic. It's better for low end, like more rock distorted guitars. If you want a beefier guitar sound, that's that mic. Okay, this is my ribbon mic. So this microphone, do you hear how warm it sounds and how smooth and how the top end is not at all harsh? You can take this microphone and you can brighten it up with an EQ and it still remains that smooth sound, whereas this other type of microphone has a bright top end, but it's very peaky. It has certain frequencies that stick out. You can get sounds that get harsh, especially Toto's lead singer has a belt. He calls it his trumpet. And when he sings loud notes, they are so loud and so piercing. And his whole vocal cord kind of closes and gets very thin and very, very hard sounding. And so this type of microphone can emphasize that problem. Whereas if you put on a ribbon, and you take your ribbon microphone and you start to brighten it up, so I'm just adding a little EQ. This isn't a very good EQ. It retains that smooth type of sound. It doesn't get peaky. It doesn't have that unusual thing. Now I'm doing a big no-no right now because I don't have a windscreen on a ribbon microphone, so I could mess it up with just the air from my mouth, but I'm being pretty careful about it. And this microphone is called a Beyer 160. It's about $800. It's really good for recording overheads. It's incredibly directional, so if I have to spot mic a solo trumpet player, I can still have a warm sound from it, and I can just pick up him. I'm not going to be picking up the whole session. I've used this quite a bit when I have done sports themes in the studio. and it's got a really nice sound, and it doesn't pick up everything. And even though it's a ribbon, it doesn't have much of a figure 8 problem. It's what they call, it's a specially designed ribbon mic, and it doesn't pick up a lot from the back. So if I talk from the back, it's not really a figure 8, but it is a ribbon pattern. It's a really unique mic, and it's an incredible microphone. So this strange looking little thing, this is what you call a reference microphone. This microphone is completely flat, so it doesn't have any boosts or any peaks anywhere, and it's a measurement microphone that you use for PA systems and things like that. It's a condenser microphone, requires phantom power, and if you notice when I was speaking in this ribbon microphone before, I reached over and I turned off phantom power. Phantom power can damage a ribbon microphone if you have a bad mic cable and you don't know you have a bad mic cable and you plug it in and that phantom gets shot to the ribbon. It can damage it. Modern ribbons don't have that problem. This is a modern ribbon microphone, not as much. Royer microphones, which is a really high-end ribbon microphone, don't have a problem with that at all. But out of safety's sake, you should never have on phantom power when you're using a ribbon microphone. So this thing is not flattering at all sounding, but it's exactly what it is. It's for measurement. The other thing is with the dynamic microphones, I was able to unplug and plug in microphones without a big pop. If you do that with a condenser, it'll make a loud noise. It can damage a PA system. It can damage your speakers. It can damage your ears. So because there's phantom power, it actually arcs when you unplug it. So you don't want to do that. So I'm turning down the volume in between each time. The other thing about these condenser microphones is they're a lot louder. I had my volume up almost all the way up before with the dynamic. Right now it's at about 12 o'clock. Let me go back to a dynamic. So here's my dynamic, and in order to get the same volume, I have to turn it all the way up. Right? That's just my fader volume. I'm not changing the mic pre right now. But just so you know, there's a big difference in level between these microphones, between a condenser and a dynamic. So if you're using a dynamic microphone and you decide, oh, I want to change to a condenser, turn your volume down, turn your mic pre down, or you'll surprise somebody or hurt somebody. Check, check, check. This microphone is a vintage, very expensive recording microphone. It's my classical microphones. If you look at the response on it, I don't know if you can see that, it's almost perfectly flat. It has a little bump on the low end, but the entire top end of the microphone is a flat response. This is a B&K microphone. It's a B&K 4006. I have a pair of them. This company was bought by a company named DPA, and DPA now makes these same microphones, but this is a vintage mic, and so I don't want them messing with it. They said, oh, send it to me. We'll fix it. We'll make it just like the new ones. I said, no, thank you. This is a vintage mic. I don't want you to change it. And so I have a pair of these. These are omnidirectional mics. They pick up the same from all sides. And the thing about these mics is I'm generally hanging these microphones. I use them for ambience, for strings. So if you have strings, violins, you know, when you play a violin, the sound holes are facing up. So the sound actually travels up on a violin, you know, as you have it under your neck. And so you hang these type of microphones, and you can hang them in venues and get a really nice response. And because they're omnidirectional, they're good for audience, they're good for reverb in a classical hall, and they're really beautiful mics. This microphone is a Neumann KM184. These are also, this is a matched pair. It's probably about, I don't remember how much they were. I don't know. Somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a pair. And it's a stereo pair that you can use for all different miking configurations. It's a very flat, natural sounding microphone. And this is also, these are small diaphragm condensers. So these are designed to be incredibly natural sounding and very flat. Great for classical recordings or guitars or anything like that. So this microphone is a AKG 451. This microphone's a little bright for me. It's got a lot of air up there. It's useful for cymbals. People use it for hi-hats. It's a very specific sound. It's a very sparkly sound. The great thing about this microphone is it's incredibly directional. So people also will use it on an upright bass. You can put it on the fingers in an upright bass and get a really nice attack from it. And then you get the bottom of the bass mic'd from the F-holes. I don't use it that much for that. I don't use this mic that much. The old versions of this mic were great. Back in the 80s and 90s, they had these mics and they were incredible. This new one, they decided they were going to make it better, and of course they didn't. So this mic has little louvers in there, little notches, and so it's got a high pass filter on it, and it's also got a pad on it, so you can turn down the volume of it. I can't plug this microphone in because I haven't made the cable for it yet. This I found in a garage sale. This is a very famous old mic. This thing must weigh 4 or 5 pounds. It's solid steel, right? It's an EV microphone. I believe it was originally designed for ham radio guys because it's got a switch here on it to turn it on and off. It's got a 4-pin conductor so you can switch it with a remote. And it's a really cool, unusual sounding microphone. And like I said, I found it at a garage sale, and it's perfect shape. It's beautiful, you know. So I'll get it wired up one day, and we'll see what it sounds like. So that's those type of microphones. We've gone through condensers. We've gone through ribbons. We've gone through dynamics. The next one I want to play for you or talk through is a tube mic. So this is let me turn it on, stand by. Check, 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 check. So you can see right away that a tube mic has a very unique color to it. It's got a very natural sound to it. This microphone is only a condenser. It doesn't have switchable patterns. It's a Audio-Technica 4060. And this mic is probably, I'd say $1,500. I have a pair of these also. So because this is a tube mic, it has this power supply, this thing under the speaker here. And that's what powers the tube inside the mic. Great mic for female vocals. I recorded a jazz artist with this. Gabriella Enders was her name. And she kept coming back to the studio, and she just loved the recordings we got with this mic. She has a bright voice, so this has a lot of body to it, and it has this really nice color to it, as opposed to a dynamic mic, which just has kind of this kind of has a pokey, peaky type of sound to it, and this is what a tube mic sounds like. So they have a totally different vibe to them. Tube mics are great for basses. They're great upright basses. I use them on a lot of things. I actually bought them for a piano artist I was working with, and I love these mics. You always have to use shock mounts with these mics, and they're really beautiful. Check. Okay. So, apart from these kind of microphones, I have some other cool stuff I want to show you. This is a little cheap mic. It's a Russian mic. It's a copy of a high-end Neumann microphone. It's called an Octava. Right? And this works in the old-style way that a lot of microphones used to work. It has the capsule separate, and then this little thing is the pad. So if you want a natural sounding, if you want a full volume microphone, you just screw the little capsule into the body, and if you want a softer, you put this little pad in between it. I showed you that reference mic for measurement. This is a reference mic for your iPhone or iPad. And it's a little tiny guy. But it's completely flat. And it's really, really a nice microphone. Omnidirectional also. And then we have pickups. And there's a few different kinds of pickups. This is called a, what is it, 411? Yeah. This is a C411, an AKG. And so this microphone, it has this black, gunky, nasty tape. And you roll it in a little ball, and you stick this little pickup on a guitar, on a piano, whatever you want. And it picks up a unique way. It's a guitar pickup. It's not a microphone. I've used them on piano. They were pretty good. They're easy to damage, and pianos, people that own pianos don't like when you put this gunk on there. So I had a little bit of problem with that. They got mad at me. It comes right off. They were just being whiny. So that's one type of pickup. This is another type of pickup. This is a high-end pickup. It's called Schertler. It's a piano pickup. And this is a disc like this. Right? And this disc, you also have an adhesive kind of putty. This green stuff here. And you get a little bit of this, and you roll it in a little ball, and you make a snake out of it. And you wrap the snake all the way around the edge of the microphone, and you put it on the piano sounding board, and it picks up. And they're nice little mics. I've worked a lot with pianos, so I've experimented with almost everything possible for pianos. This is my favorite piano pickup, and it's a really unusual pickup. It's called a Yamahiko. And this designer is from Japan. And he brought these out for me to try. He's actually a physicist. And what he discovered, he originally made these as an upright bass pickup. Oops, I don't have the pickup in here. I have the box. I think the pickup's in the bag in there. But what it is, it's a little disc. And on an upright bass, they have an adjustable bridge. And you turn this little screw and the bridge gets higher or lower. This replaced that screw. And so what you would do is you could take, let me see if I can, let me find the pickup. Where would that be? Give me 1 second. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So this is a cool little device, and I've never seen anything else like it. It actually works on pressure. So all of these other type of devices, you know, they're either a little diaphragm type of thing, but this is not. This is solid. It's a solid piece of metal. And what happens is underneath a piano, you have the sounding board, which is that big flat board that goes the whole length of the piano. And underneath that are these big, like 4x4 braces of the piano, those big blocks of wood. So what you do is you take this little gauge and you measure the distance between the soundboard and that block of wood, and that says, oh, it's a number 2. Okay, you come over here and you find the little plastic block here that says number 2. And you screw this thing in to this plastic block. In theory. There it goes. All right, so you screw this thing in, and this plastic block, I don't know what kind of plastic this is. There's nothing flexible about it. I don't know what it is, but it's incredibly tough and rigid and not flexible at all. So you set this on top of that big 4x4 under the piano. You put this little disc on top, little magnetic disc, and you screw it up until it touches the soundboard of the piano. And then you connect a little cable to it. And this is the best sounding piano pickup I've ever used. And I've never seen anybody else design a microphone like this. And he gave it to me, and I was helping him develop the electronics for it. So he made me my own little prototype for Ken Freeman DI box for it, so I could help him design some electronics for it. Really incredible system. Genius guy. And so apart from that, he took it one step forward. And he decided to use the same technology. And he made this contraption. This is the same pickup, only it's designed for very expensive acoustic guitars. And you just, you gauge the depth of the body of the guitar. You put it over the guitar, down by the bridge of the guitar, and you tighten it just enough. It has a safety on it, so it won't over-tighten. It won't ever put enough pressure on a guitar to damage it. And so people with very high-end classical guitars, I worked with this jazz guitarist named Earl Klugh for a long time. They don't want to put pickups in their guitar because you have to cut holes and you can damage it and you can change the sound. And this device avoids all that. It just clamps on there. It's kind of ugly, but you don't really see it much once it's on the guitar. And then this microphone, I don't have to plug it in. This is a stereo microphone. So the way it works is that you point it at the source, and it has these two things on the side, and it makes two lobes that have cancellation in the middle, and it does a technique called MS recording. And you can either use it with phantom power, or if you're using it just with a camera or something, it's a great mic. You can actually put a battery inside it. It's a little specialty battery, a little tiny lithium battery. And you won't have to use phantom power. You could plug it directly into a camera. And this is a Shure VP88. And it has two outputs because it's a stereo microphone. It's also a condenser. It's got a low pass setting for battery and a low pass setting for phantom. So you can, that's how you change from phantom to battery with that switch here. And then it has you can change how wide the stereo field is. So it can pick up kind of a narrow stereo or wider. It's got 3 different patterns. And then it does this other technique called MS technique. And maybe we'll talk about that this semester. I'm not sure. Let's see. Is that everything? I think I went through every mic. Excellent. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a feel for how different microphones are, because there really are ears as recording engineers and as artists. A microphone is our ear. It picks up by its frequency response. It picks up by its characteristics. It's by making the right choice of a microphone. Most of the time you don't need a lot of EQ. Most of the time you don't need a lot of anything. Right microphone position. Okay. So I'm going to take, which mic would I use? I'll just start with one of these mics. I'm going to play a little music through a speaker here. And I want to show you some polar pattern response. Check. Check. 1, 2. Okay. So I just have music playing through this little mono speaker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the mic, and you can see how the pattern works. This is a cardioid microphone. I see what happened. I boosted all that high end for that other mic. So you see how much rejection it has from the side of the mic? So by positioning the mic right, you can almost cut out all noise. So this is incredibly useful when you're working with ensembles. So you always want to put instruments in the dead zones when you're trying to isolate instruments. So if you know that you have a cardioid pattern, you know that you have the sides of the mic and the back of the mic aren't going to pick up that much. This is a very narrow cardioid. This one's quite a bit wider, so as I come to the side, you hear more, right? So when I turn it all the way around, check, it's almost gone. But as you come back around the side of the microphone, you start to hear more signal. So all these mics have different characteristics, and you have to know your microphones, and you have to know which microphones to buy. Because you can spend a lot of money, or you can spend a little bit of money and get the right stuff. If we work with a tube mic, it's going to have a totally different pattern. It's going to be much not as narrow. This is still a cardioid. Check. 1, 2, 1, 2. And listen how much different this type of microphone sounds. Right, so this has a much wider pattern. It's a much more open microphone. They call that an open microphone when it has a wider pattern. Oh, there's somebody trying to get in. Anastasia. Sorry, Anastasia. How long you been waiting out there? Hello, hello?
Only like a minute. I don't know how I kicked myself out. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. I hope you didn't miss a lot. Great. So yeah, so this is a tube mic. Let me switch over to my my main mic here, and I'm going to show you the different patterns with Figure 8 and Omni, and then we'll kind of be done with this section. Check, 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 check. Check, check, 1, 2, check. Okay. So now this is a cardioid pipe. This pattern should be pretty similar to the tube mic I just played. Let's just check it real quick and then we'll move on here. So this mic is even wider than the tube mic, it seems. And you hear the difference between this mic. It's much brighter on the top end. All that sizzly stuff on the recording come out much brighter than the tube mic, which has a really nice warm color to it. This is just a straight condenser. I'll switch to Omni now, and I'll show you that. Here's the front of the mic. Right, so it's equal all the way around. It really has very little bumps. The only reason it has bumps is mainly because of these kind of side ridges that hold the diaphragm in the center, and they hold the windscreens on. So this is a Figure 8 pattern. So Figure 8s are really useful for isolating things from the side. You can use it for to have two singers. You can have one on each side of the mic. You can have someone here and someone here. So let's take a listen. I'm just going to turn it with my voice first. So here's the front of the mic. Here's the side of the mic. You hear that rejection? I'm speaking exactly the same level as I was from the front. It's incredible rejection with a Figure 8. Then I'm going to spin around to the back. Here's the back of the microphone. You hear the back of the microphone sounds darker? That's another characteristic of a Figure 8 pattern. Here's the side again, almost completely gone. And here's the front of the microphone. Very cool microphone pattern. So I'm going to do that with music too. So let's just do some basics of recording, because your next assignment is recording. Let's talk about your recording assignment first. Alrighty. Okay. So undergraduates record at least 2 audio tracks and 2 MIDI tracks. This is just getting you going. This is a precursor to your final, which your final you're going to be using all the techniques we've talked about. And I'll be assigning that soon. You're going to have plenty of time to do your final, but it's going to be much more tracks and much longer. And you're going to be using MIDI. You're going to be using audio. We're going to talk about mixing techniques. And this is just to get you going. So if you have any questions, you can figure it out before you jump into the final. So undergraduates record at least 2 audio tracks and 2 MIDI tracks, 30 seconds. Graduate record at least 4 audio tracks and 4 MIDI tracks, 1 minute long. The audio tracks, I'm not concerned about what you do. So I've given examples here. If you're a singer, you can record a MIDI piano and bass and then record your voice over the top as audio. If you're a theater major and you're not a musician, it's okay. We're just trying to teach you techniques here, right? You can record some simple MIDI tracks and recite a poem over the top. Or you can record, maybe you want to record 2 parts of dialogue and have some kind of background music underneath it. It's all about learning the tools at this point. I'm not going to judge you on your musical ability, but you get perks if you kill me with some great music like some of you guys are doing. I'm really enjoying it. You can record things around the house. So if you have if you want to use percussion, if you don't have a shaker, you can use a bottle of pills, or you can put, some kind of seeds in a pill bottle or something, make different sounds with it. Empty container can be a drum. But I want you to try to get something musical out of these sounds. And the audio tracks don't have to go from beginning to end. You can, use arrangement. And that's it. So that's going to be due in 2 weeks. So we can turn over a draft on the 1st and the finals due on the 8th. So I have another mic over here. That's set up for recording. This main microphone I use is just for Zoom. So I'm monitoring the Zoom signal with it, but it's not being recorded into Pro Tools because I'm using a different interface. So what I'm going to do with this is I want to show you the basics of recording and punching in and out. Because in order to work effectively in Pro Tools, you need to be able to stop and punch in and out. And punch in and out just means that you stop recording at one place, and then right after that, you start recording again. So you're actually punching into an existing track. So if I just do a little recording here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. So with punching, you can say I wanted to punch in. I played a great guitar riff, and I flubbed a couple of notes in the middle. And say I wanted to punch in the numbers 3 and the 4, pretending this is a guitar part. So what I can do is I can select the area that I want to record. Right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to re-record 3 and 4. And if you look up at the top of the screen here, there's something called pre-roll and post-roll. And this is where you can set up kind of like your count off and how long you want the music to play after you stop recording. Pre-roll is how much you listen to. It automatically records wherever you have it selected. So if I'm not going to record now, but I'll just show you. If I just hit record now with no pre-roll, it'll just erase those. You can't do that when you're trying to punch into a track. You need a ramp or some time before. And that's what this pre-roll and post-roll does. You turn it on by clicking on it. And now I have two measures before I have the punch. So I'm listening to these, I'm recording on this little block, and then I'm punching out or listening to these again. So let's try that. One, two, three, four. Okay. Now I can turn this on and off by using a key command, and that's Command K. And Command K turns pre-roll on and off. Right? So if I want to listen back and I don't want to hear the pre-roll, I can just turn it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now, there's another thing that you should know about. I'll go to this mic, it sounds a little better. There's something called Quick Punch. And I recommend you always have this on. This is very important. So if I were punching in this track again, I'm going to undo it. I'm going to turn on Quick Punch first. And I've recorded this little block here. But suppose that I started speaking a little bit before that punch in. What if I started speaking right here? And when I started recording, it clipped off part of that audio. Quick Punch is a safety valve for that. And it does a couple of different things, Quick Punch. So I've messed up here and I've clipped off a little bit of my word. Well, I can't drag this region any further back, right? It's only recorded that little amount that I had punched in and out. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to select this little area again. And this time I'm going to talk a little bit early before my punch. And I'll show you what it does. Oops. I don't want to wait for that long pre-roll. I'm going to change it to 1. So now when I punch in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So what happened is I was rushing a little bit. And by rushing a little bit, I clipped off part of my word. And so that's gone forever. But with Quick Punch, it's not. Quick Punch is always recording in the background. So it's a safety valve. And you can just pull back the edit. And now I have all the words. I'm going to turn off pre-roll and post-roll by hitting Command K. And then I'm going to listen from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So it's a safety valve. The other thing that's really cool about Quick Punch is if you don't have Quick Punch on, then you have to use pre-roll and post-roll to punch in and out. You don't have any other options. With Quick Punch on, you can do it on the fly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to listen to 1 and 2, and then I'm going to punch in on 3 and 4 on the fly. So the way I do that is I'm going to hit the space bar, and I'm going to listen to the first 2, and when I get to 3, I'm going to hit record. And there's a couple of different ways to hit record, but I'm going to use the numeric keypad 3. So I'm going to hit the space bar first, I'm going to hit the numeric keypad, and I'm going to punch it live. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, wrong microphone. Here we go, try again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, so what I did was I hit the number 3 key twice. So I hit it once to punch in and once to punch out. So you're actually doing it on the fly. And this is the way I work as an engineer all the time. If you're playing guitar, it's hard to work like that because you've got your hands on the fretboard and you can't reach up and hit the key to record. But for me, when I'm recording vocalists or something like that, I don't want to take the time to set up a pre-roll and post-roll. So I will just punch it wild on the fly, it's called. And that means that I'm controlling where it punches in and out. And that's called quick punch. So that's the two things that quick punch do that are incredibly helpful. Right? So you should always just leave it on. That's what I suggest. Let's see here. The other thing is if you're not using quick punch, if we're going back to quick punch off, or if we're going to use an automated punch, right? Even with quick punch on, if I select a region or I select an area that I want to record and I hit record from the top, it's not going to start recording. I have to turn on pre-roll, post-roll. It's not going to start recording until it gets to that selection. So we're going to hear that and then punch here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So that's our quick punch. There's one other little trick that's kind of cool with your pre-roll and post-roll. If you don't want to set a whole bar to go back and you know that you want to start listening from maybe this point, and then you want to start recording at this point, you can set your pre-roll without typing in numbers. And this is a nice little trick. If you just hold down the Option key and click where you want your pre-roll to start, it'll set the numbers for you automatically. So now I'm 2 beats and 586 ticks is my pre-roll. But what I know is if I clicked right on the edge of this region. If I click over here, it sets a different number. If I click here, so wherever you Option click while you have this region selected here, that'll set your pre-roll to that amount. So if you know you want to start listening at the beginning of a chorus, and that's here, you can click there, Option click there. You'll listen to all this music, and then you'll punch in your couple of notes, and that's it. And you can set your post-roll to listen to the rest of the chorus if you wanted to. So I'm going to set my pre-roll there, and I just Option clicked here. And now when I hit record, I have to have this selected. Now when I hit record, it's going to pre-roll exactly from this waveform start. And it's going to punch in these two, and then we're going to listen to the rest. And how to listen to the rest is you just make a longer post roll. You can make 2 bars post roll. A lot of times I'll leave my post roll set to 1,000 bars because I can always stop it with my space bar. So here's a punch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now this will just keep playing now. But the trick is that even though it's still playing there, I only set it for 2 bars. If I were to look underneath here, like if I grab this little region, and let me duplicate this. If I were to look under here, maybe I played something really cool after I already punched out. I could grab this little region and I could move it down to another track. I'll just cut, and I'll use my key commands that we already have, the P and the semicolon, to move our selection down. I'll move it down, and I'm going to paste it down on another track. And now, if I drag this region back out, look, I was recording the whole time. So I didn't lose anything. So somebody was asking me about that a few weeks ago with MIDI. And you can't really do it with MIDI, but with audio, there's a really, really cool backup that you can always be recording. And so even if you have your pre-roll, post-roll, or your selection for your punch-in set wrong, you're still recording the whole time and you're not going to lose anything. And that's really useful, especially for punching drums in and out, because maybe he plays the kick drum a little bit early on the punch and he played it at one point on the other, and you had his exact edits from the way he played it the first time selected. Then you've always got this safety valve that you can grab the edit and you can drag it back a little bit. Okay, is everybody clear on that? Because this is really good stuff. This is really crucial for running Pro Tools effectively. Any questions on that? Okay. Excellent. So that's it. Let's get some recording done. Let's see. You guys go out there and get creative. If you want to do 20 tracks of audio, you can. I'm just giving you a required amount. Do whatever you can. It's going to be fun, and get in there and get your feet wet and use these different techniques that I'm talking about with pre-roll and post-roll, and play around with quick punch and not quick punch. These other record modes will, destructive record I never use that. There's no reason to be actually deleting audio. When you use destructive record, that's exactly what it says. When you hit record, you're deleting whatever is there on the drive. Loop record I use sometime. We'll get into that. And then track punch is you can punch individual tracks if you have a bunch of tracks going. And I'm not sure what the difference between destructive punch and destructive record is. I've never used either one of those. It's just not necessary to make destructive edits in an audio file when hard drive space is cheap and there's a chance that you can mess up. All right, so that's it for you guys. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed my little microphone self-indulgent moment with all my collection of microphones. And I'll see you guys next week. And just give me something so I can give you some input. So that's it. Thanks, guys.